A region in turmoil sets the tone for a meeting between two of its biggest powers. Can this rapprochement contribute to stability in the Middle East? Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Strait Talk. It was an important visit that had a lot riding on it, and many are now hoping that the Turkish president's visit to Iran will bring clarity to where relations are headed between Ankara and Tehran. The two sides haven't often agreed on a range of issues, but there's new intent to resolve differences, including over the conflict in Syria. Observers are calling it a new partnership between Turkey and Iran. Strait Talk's Ömer Kablan reports from Tehran.
He came prepared and ready to strike deals. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan traveled to Tehran with 7 of his ministers, along with his chief of general staff and head of Turkey's National Intelligence Agency, a sign of a changing relationship. Iran and Turkey may seem like unlikely partners following events of the past few years, especially in Syria. Iran has provided military support to the Assad regime in a brutal war against its own people. Turkey has done the opposite. But they are saying the same thing about the recent Northern Iraq referendum.
Ve bu referandumu da kesinlikle gayrimeşru olarak telakki ediyoruz.
Irak یک کشور واحد است، سوریه یک کشور واحد است.
Turkey has already threatened to stop buying oil from the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, while Iran has mobilized troops on its border. But beyond an economic embargo, is a military intervention possible?
که در میز مذاکره نظامی‌ها در مورد منطقه دارن صحبت می‌کنن و این قاطعاً ممکنه فقط به مذاکره ختم نشه.
And it's not just a military alliance both countries are after.
Tabii hedefimiz 30 milyar dolarlık ticaret, dış ticaret hacmine varmak.
In an already volatile region, will Turkey and Iran's budding relationship be a step towards a more stable Middle East?
And for the latest from Tehran, we're joined by our correspondent once again, Ömer Kablan. Ömer, good to see you. How has Erdogan's visit to Tehran gone down with the Iranians?
Well, Ali, before President Erdogan came to Iran, he said that after his trip, they will have a roadmap to tackle regional issues. And that's exactly what we have. In Syria, they said they will cooperate militarily to fight terrorists, including against Daesh and al-Nusra. In northern Iraq, they said that the illegal KRG referendum is non-binding, and they will make sure that chaos doesn't ensure in that region, and Iraq will protect its territorial integrity. And they also said that between Turkey and Iran, there would be new economic heights.
Ömer, tell us about this visit in the context of recent Iran-Turkey relations.
Well, Ali, we can say that the Gulf crisis actually triggered a closer relationship between the two countries. Turkey and Iran stood by Qatar against other Gulf states who were implementing a blockade on the country, and they made sure the country wasn't absolutely isolated. And of course, after that, we saw in the Astana talks, Turkey and Iran said they will cooperate militarily to preserve the territorial integrity of Syria. And finally, of course, the most critical and pressing issue for both countries at the moment, the illegal KRG referendum. And once more at this visit, they reiterated what a grave mistake it was and that it would have huge consequences.
Ömer Kablan, thank you for the update from Tehran. And to discuss President Erdogan's visit further, I'm joined from Tehran by Abbas Aslami, who is an analyst based in Tehran. Thank you for joining us, Abbas. We've seen a convergence between Tehran and Ankara over the conflict in Syria, over the recently held KRG referendum. Given that context, how important is Erdogan's visit to Tehran?
Firstly, thank you for having me. In fact, Iran and Turkish president have so far met for 10 times, but the recent visit given to the developments in the region recently is one of the most important, if not the most important, of the meetings of the leaders of both countries, because this meeting is taking place while an issue of regional issue, naming Syria, has been one of the areas of difference and confrontation between two countries during the past years. But this issue is now changing to be an area of cooperation between Tehran and Ankara, and one can say that Syrian issue, once a issue for difference, is now changing to a cooperation, and a new era in this regard is starting and beginning. But in terms of the other issues, which I can refer to the separation referendum taking place in the Iraqi Kurdistan, I think both countries are facing with similar concerns in this regard, because the region has been volatile for many years, and bringing issues of this kind by some extra-regional countries in order to bring segregation in the region can complicate the region more. So
you mentioned the KRG, Abbas. Tell us how cooperation between Tehran and Ankara can address this issue of the KRG referendum, which you call as a separation referendum?
You know, because both countries are facing with similar threat and concerns, and extra-regional countries are not cooperating in this well. However, they are in words opposing the referendum, but in practice we have been seeing some contradictory actions by them, and it tells us that no one other than the regional actors, including Iran, Turkey, and also Iraq and Syria, can solve this problem better than this.
So we've seen a convergence on issues in Syria, as you mentioned, Abbas. We've seen a convergence on the KRG, recently held KRG referendum. What will it take to further solidify this partnership between Turkey and Iran?
Yes, in terms of the regional issues, I think Iran and Turkey are countries that are seeing unfriendly policies from Western countries, including the United States, or Turkey from European countries as well. On issues related to Qatar, tension with some Arabic countries, again, Turkey and Iran can share some joint and similar viewpoints as well. So they can also, due to the facts that they are having and due to the realities of the region, I think they can have cooperation on different fields. One is the regional issues. The second is the bilateral issues they can have on defense, on economic and political section.
Abbas Aslami, thank you for joining us from Tehran. Still to come on Strait Talk. The Middle East is a dangerous neighborhood, and Turkey is counting on collaboration to meet the challenge. And we look at the impact of Iran's support for Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad and how it has helped his regime survive. The Middle East, it's often called the world's most dangerous and unstable region. And for a reason. For Turkey, it's the result of decades of Western meddling in what are essentially local problems. An Ankara solution is simple, as Osman Lone explains.
The Middle East today is a region gripped by war, geopolitical rivalries, and instability. And the recently concluded referendum in northern Iraq will only add to more volatility. That's according to Turkish President Erdogan, who warned of the looming dangers.
Yeni Lawrence'ler bu defa başarılı olamayacaklardır. Bunu bilmenizi istiyorum.
He was referring to, of course, the British spy T.S. Lawrence, who was instrumental in the Arab Revolt, a man who never had a single day of military training, and whose physical appearance few could detail. He liaised with nomadic tribes to help them rise up against the Ottomans, and to allow the British to greatly increase their supply of arms and equipment in the region. And that region is still reeling from those scars to this day, with an influx of external actors dictating what should happen in the Middle East. Iran is facing sanctions for its quest for nuclear energy and allegedly a weapons capability. Syria is facing its 7th year of war against what Assad says are external terrorists. And Turkey is facing an ongoing threat from the PKK and YPG terrorists who America are openly funding. So would it be best for these countries in the region to sort out their own problems? And Turkey's foreign policy also claims this, and is geared towards peaceful solutions and firmly believes regional problems can be resolved and settled by regional factors. Turkey is a main component in the Middle East, and so it links the protection and security of the Arab countries directly with its own. The Turkish government stated time and again that sanctions against Iran were counterproductive and damaging to diplomatic efforts, and offered to play a mediating role with the West over Iran and the nuclear issue. Turkey led the Syria peace talks in Astana, which led to Syrian government officials and opposition groups sitting down for the first time since the war started, eventually agreeing with Russia and Iran to 4 de-escalation zones. And President Erdogan was recently on a 2-day trip to the Gulf in an effort to resolve Qatar's diplomatic crisis. So it is clear Turkey's foreign policy works on a tangible level in the region to develop stability and economic security. So surely, is it not in the best interest of all that regional factors be solved by the region's own actors?
And to discuss Turkey's vision for the region, I'm joined by Ahmet Oysal. He is the director for the Center of Iranian Studies. Thank you for joining us, Ahmet. In recent years, Turkey's president has said that the region should be able to solve its own problems. What is the thinking behind this philosophy, this initiative, Ahmet?
Yes, this is a very important perspective that Turkey's President Erdogan is suggesting, because there are many problems in the region and most of them originate from outside intervention. So Erdogan is suggesting that we solve these problems locally or regionally in a way that those who are part of the problem, suffering from, let's say, sectarianism, and if it is a Shia-Sunni conflict, and the sides that fight together, I mean, with each other, should come together to solve it. If it is an ethnic problem, if it is poverty, if other issues that he's suggesting, we should solve our problems, because the solutions imposed from outside doesn't yield any positive results.
Shouldn't it be the case to begin with that countries who are in the region who are being affected should solve their own problems? So why hasn't this been the case to begin with?
Yes, unfortunately, the countries in the region don't hold their own decision themselves. Also, there are many countries that are not ruled by democracy, so the popular demands are not reflected to the government. So at the end, you have problems with sometimes governments are causing these problems. Sometimes the friction between two governments. Sometimes they are making up also artificial problems that needs to be solved. And also you have maybe many problems that come from, let's say, American invasion of Iraq and other interventions in the region. So you need a new perspective to solve these problems. This is what we mean by the regional perspective.
What about issues like the refugee crisis in Europe?
Yes, refugee crisis is a result of these conflicts. If they stop refugees, for example, the flow of refugees stop from Syria, of course there are many refugees still living outside and it is causing a problem. But at least if you stop fighting, if you stop wars, if you stop bleeding, then people stay at their home and maybe they return to their homes to that these problems also does not cause international consequences and doesn't affect the other countries. So it can be more positive also. This local and regional cooperation is more crucial now than before, I think, even for crises like refugee crisis that are of international dimension. And still we insist on the and we don't ignore the importance of these great powers. Of course, they have bigger weight in many issues, but still they can follow as they did in Syria, for example. When Turkey, Russia and Iran offered a solution in Syria, then they did not oppose it, and it is helping. So they can follow these local initiatives rather than sabotaging these regional initiatives to solve these problems. And Turkey is willing to solve that.
Ahmet Oysal, thank you for joining us from
problem.
Ankara.
Thank you.
If one were to pick a country that has helped prolong and escalate the Syrian civil war, it would be hard not to pick Iran. Having backed Bashar al-Assad's regime from the moment the first protesters hit the streets in 2011, 6 years of Iranian involvement has helped prop up Assad and bring about one of the greatest man-made tragedies in recent memory. Courtney Keeley breaks down where Iranian intervention has led to, which some accuse is complicity in war crimes.
Iran's newest national martyr killed in Syria. 25-year-old Mohsen Houjaji was part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps assisting the Syrian army. He was captured by Daesh near the Iraqi border in August. 2 days later, he was beheaded. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei personally attended his funeral. Meanwhile, on the streets of Tehran, mourners set fire to American and Israeli flags.
محسن حججی راه امام حسین رو طی کرد این همه بیداری به دنبال خودش داشت.
It's the kind of symbolism of Shia martyrdom stoked by the Ayatollah since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. For decades, Iran has had a long reach stretching throughout the Middle East and all the way into South America with its clandestine operations. But the once secret Al-Quds, the special forces branch of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, has been very public about its involvement in the Syrian conflict. Major General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Al-Quds since 1998, is often filmed on the ground in different parts of Syria, clearly in command. He surfaced many times as the Assad regime fought to retake the city of Aleppo last year, using starvation tactics backed by Russian and Syrian airstrikes. The pattern of deliberate and indiscriminate attacks on civilians is well documented by groups like Human Rights Watch. But instead of sending many of its own troops, Iran has outsourced the dirty work of war and recruited fighters to battle for the survival of the Assad regime in the name of Shia Islam. Iran gives the orders, supplies arms and training, and pays the salaries of several militias, with Soleimani overseeing everything. And the groups also have a lot of autonomy. It makes it hard to single out Iran as the perpetrator of war crimes, since the militias are mixed in alongside Syrian troops. But its recruitment and support of so many Shia militias also serves to shore up the devotion for a nearly formed Iranian crescent of Shia influence starting in Iran, going through Iraq, straight into Syria, and then into Lebanon. Soldiers like Houjaji, often called defenders of the shrine, a reference to the Shia holy sites in Syria, serve to stoke sectarianism and deflect away from Iran's complicity in the continuing horrors of the civil war. Courtney Keeley, Strait Talk.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined in the studio by Amar Kaf. He's the Executive Director of the Omran Center for Strategic Studies here in Istanbul. Amar, what is the extent of Iran's involvement in saving Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria?
Iran has invested a lot of lives in Syria, has developed many non-state actors, militias. Close to 60,000 fighters fight on the ground, about 8,000 to 10,000 officers as advisors, quote unquote, from the Republican Guard and so from the ICRG. So This is the extent of its military involvement. Unfortunately or fortunately, they were not able to save him without also the Russian involvement in 2 years ago. So they
which
tried
has been
their
more
best.
important, Russian or Iranian backing?
Well,
or both together?
Iran has taken the forefront of saving Bashar al-Assad even before Russia came to the scene, and also it has lost more lives. Many high-ranking officers have died, and have spent also more money in terms of the economy.
You're talking about thousands of people, thousands of soldiers, Iranians, other groups aligned with Iran, Hezbollah, you've got Iraqi Shia groups as well. How has that changed the demographic makeup of Syria where these forces are?
Well, huge shifts. There are cities and towns
in Aleppo,
now,
for example.
Daraya is completely wiped out, 100% city wiped out from its original inhabitants, with new families and people that are coming from outside of Syria, families of fighters sponsored by the Iranian militias. And so it has completely changed many cities, 100%. Some cities, perhaps 50%. Homs was apparently reconstructed, but only 20% of its original inhabitants came back to the city of Homs. So you go across the country, there is a major demographic shift, unfortunately.
But observers also say that Iran has been instrumental in bringing about the so-called